Hello and welcome to my podcast Innervation, where I aim to bring a bit of humanness to the world of STEM, which is science, technology, engineering and maths. I grew up in a very STEM household where we were always encouraged to ask questions, be curious and think logically about the way the world works, and as a result I qualified as a fluid dynamicist, where I was able to mathematically model how gases and liquids behave. Which is really insane when I think about it now, because as I got deeper and deeper into my academic research, I truly began to believe that everything on this planet could be explained using mathematical equations. Since then, I've grown up a bit, and I have to admit that life has taught me that not everything is predictable and logical and can be tied up in a mathematical bow. And those lessons that I've learned haven't always been easy. Life is actually messy, chaotic and non-linear, and here on Innervation, I want to take a good look at how other people in STEM approach life as regular humans, rather than as brain boxes that have everything figured out. Each week on Series 2 of Innervation, I'll be chatting to someone incredible from the world of science, technology, engineering and maths to find out what they've learned from their life experiences, in the hope that we can all benefit from a bit of shared wisdom. This week, I talked to Kerrine Bryan. She's a lead power systems engineer, author and founder of the Social Justice and Engineering Initiative. Here's how she explained to me what she's doing in engineering.
At the moment, I'm working for WSP USA, and I work in the generation group and also kind of crossover with renewables. I do the electrical engineering, power system studies mainly. So at the moment I'm working on quite a few like large and I'd say high profile wind projects in the US, some of like the largest wind projects they've had, and then some large renewable solar projects where I'm looking at the power system studies, so like short circuit analysis and load flow studies. And then apart from that, I work on a few kind of engineering, electrical distribution projects in New York. There's a lot of work that's still being done after Hurricane Sandy, where kind of, for example, hospitals need to move all of their electrical power outside of the flood zone. So it's kind of relocation of equipment and that kind of thing.
So she fell into engineering after narrowly escaping doing accountancy because she was seen to be good at maths. And she ended up trying engineering, and she got her first job and was asked whether she wanted to try working in the power systems department at work. And her colleagues gave her absolute freedom to go back to working on control systems if she didn't enjoy it. And what was so amazing is that what could have been intimidating for a lot of people, which is that she didn't see many people like her in the industry, it actually made her have a very different attitude towards it.
But I did enjoy it, and I realised also that there was, not enough people doing it. And when you're talking about kind of race, and diversity, one of the things that I tend to do since I've started engineering is I know that it's harder. My mom's always told me it's harder for me, as a black woman to get to the same place as kind of my white male or even white female friends. So I'm always looking for something where there's not many people doing it and there's not much competition. And that kind of has made me pick certain things in terms of career choices as well.
I must say, I was absolutely blown away by this idea of kind of knowing that she has to work harder and kind of facing that challenge and not seeing it as a victim. A lot of people could actually say, I'm working really hard, I'm not getting further than my peers, despite the fact that I'm working harder than them possibly. But she used it as a kind of incentive. And I found that attitude really, really empowering. I must admit that I was definitely someone that probably was in victim mode when I look back and think about it now. This idea that, there's no one like me and, because of that, I'm really disadvantaged. I mean, really, it's about your own attitude towards something. And I find her attitude towards not seeing many people like her at work really healthy and strong. This is not something that held her back. This was not an obstacle. And the fact that her mum was telling her that, that she has to work harder, is probably something that, she grew up with, that kind of attitude. And it's really, it's a really refreshing way of looking at things.
Yeah, so it didn't put you off. It actually drove you, that you were unconventional.
Yeah. And just the fact that I know even now, and in STEM generally, there's a lack of people of color, or like you said, it's mostly white male. So knowing that also gives me the drive to want to do it.
So because I kind of identified with this sense of not feeling like there are many people like you around, I wanted to know from her how she dealt with being different in her environment.
I don't know. How have you dealt with being different? Because for me, when I was in engineering, I really was so completely the odd one out.
Yeah.
And whilst it was quite refreshing sometimes, there was no pressure to be like anyone else. Sometimes it felt very sort of like lonely. Like, how have you got through? How have you pushed through that?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I felt at the start of my career, I felt it was a case of having to prove myself more. But I don't know if it's my kind of mentality is that if I know I have to prove myself more, that's putting me kind of ahead of others, because I'm kind of doing that extra bits, which is only improving me, really. But yeah, it was. I guess at the start it was a challenge, and it got to a point in my my previous role where I could see that there was kind of nowhere to go. That the kind of culture wasn't as inclusive, I'd say. But since moving to New York and working for WSP, like, it's so different. Like, even the team I'm on, I've never had this before, where it's like 50% female of like technical people. It's a very diverse team. Even at the moment, we've got one white male, which is so I've never seen before. But I mean, they do go out of their way to kind of make sure they have a diverse workforce, which it really makes all that difference.
Gosh, I mean, if that's not empowerment, I don't know what is. This idea that, yeah, there's no one like me, but that just makes me want to try harder, is so brilliant. I mean, yeah, I can't put it into words. Like, it really is just so undefeatable, this attitude that, no one's going to bring her down. And I think it oozes inner confidence. This idea that, there's no one like me, and that's awesome kind of attitude. I mean, gosh, I wish I had that when I was younger. It's interesting because her attitude has really taken her to different territories, and she now works in a company that is US based. And so we were just discussing the differences between the UK and the US, and we got onto the subject of unconscious bias.
I would say that unconscious bias is more of an issue in the UK than the US.
Right.
The unconscious side, and the conscious bias, worse in the US. But
right, yeah, that's.
So I was going to say, people aren't scared to talk about. At least at my workplace, we have. I'm sure with a lot of places now, there's like the D&I moments and people don't seem to be scared to talk about things, as I would imagine my previous colleagues in the UK.
I love this idea that she just does extra work and she pushes herself further, and none of that is wasted, because there's a real attitude that whatever she is doing for herself is always going to be of benefit, even if it's not an instant gratification or short-term win. You know, it's this idea that however much hard work she puts into herself will pay off at some point. And I find that also really strong and really resilient, because I think sometimes I come across people that have quite a lazy attitude and they only do what they absolutely have to do in order to get a result. And I don't think that really helps people. I think it's very half-hearted, and it's just not genuine or authentic. I mean, I think we should do things in life because we want to do them, and because it brings us joy, and because we're being of service to other people. I don't think we should do things just to get a kind of self-centered result. And, you know, her attitude of kind of working really hard to prove herself, even if she doesn't get to prove herself, it was like this sense of doing it for herself. And I don't know, there's just something really wise about that. I've also worked in the US, and I must say that the cultures are very different. And I've certainly felt that in the US, there was more willingness to talk about the problems and the issues, which I think is really good, because it means that you've got more of a chance of solving the problems. And in the US and in the UK, there was less ease with talking about these kinds of topics, which is really funny because, well, not funny, which is really quite serious, because we often think of the States of having a real racial problem. And, you know, sometimes I feel like in the UK, yes, we seem to be more open about different cultures, but as someone who is a person of colour, I do feel like it's not always seen all the way through. You know, we raise these issues, but then we don't quite finish the topic. We don't quite do anything about it. And I didn't find that in the US. I felt like people actually did something about it, even though the problems in the US seem to be worse. Anyway, that's not really a topic I want to get deeply into because it's quite controversial. But there are obviously differences between the territories. And the conversation I had with Kerrine made me kind of ask why it is that we fear talking about diversity and inclusion in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, what do you reckon the fear is in talking about D&I over here?
I reckon, and maybe this is part of the British culture, is like being seen maybe offending someone. So, you know, it is difficult conversations that need to be had, and maybe I guess that the British culture is that we like to kind of avoid that kind of conflict. Or
I think it's true, you know, in the UK we don't want to upset anyone. We have that stiff upper lip. We want to be politically correct. We want to be polite. All of those things, which is, you know, quite endearing in some ways, but also it means that we end up avoiding topics like diversity and inclusion. And so I've been quite encouraged in seeing the efforts that companies are making in the UK, but I think that we can do more, and having awkward conversations like the one that's coming up now on this podcast, I think is really necessary.
Yeah.
And we should start having more conversations about it here.
Yeah.
I mean, even between you and me right now, we're a bit nervous that we might say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
You know, there's two women of colour in engineering talking about it, and we're like, oh, maybe we might say the wrong thing. And it's like, no, we're having a conversation about our valid experiences here of being in a very male-dominated industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are we feeling a bit sort of like tentative and a bit nervous about what we might say that's wrong? I mean, is our experiences not, is it not valid that we felt like we were not really allowed to be ourselves in the industry? I don't know.
Clearly, I was just having a rant. But then I went on to ask two questions that I'm going to be asking in every single conversation for this series 2 on innovation, which is, what's the best advice you've ever been given from friends and family? And this was Kerrine's response.
The best advice I was given was from my mentor, actually, which was never think that you know everything, which I guess is about being humble.
Yeah.
It's especially in engineering, you need to kind of have open ears and have room for conversation. There's always something that can, if someone has an opinion or a suggestion, it can make a big difference when you're looking at engineering design, and just generally in life. Listening to people and learning. That's the way we learn new things.
Yeah, I love that. I'm like, I don't know what's happening to me, but I just feel as time goes on, I really need to be around authentic people. I really need to be around people that just say how it is. I just seem to have so much less tolerance these days for people that are pretending to be more than they are. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's an age thing. But I just, I find it so refreshing when people can just be vulnerable. Maybe that's a sign of where I'm getting to in my own life, where, I'm starting to let the guard down and starting to kind of really just need to be honest with myself and others about how I'm feeling. And sometimes it's not always going to be pretty, But I love this idea of kind of not feeling like you need to know everything, because I think in STEM there's always this pressure that we need to have answers and we need to know it all kind of thing. And people in STEM are just as human as the rest of us, and sometimes we just don't know, and sometimes we need to ask for help. And the idea that you can have the humility to say, I need to learn, is just it's really real and it's really refreshing. So I love that piece of advice that she was given. So my second question for my podcast is, what's the most humbling experience you've ever had? And this was Kerrine's response.
I'd say for me, what's changed me, I recently turned 40, and in the same month I lost 2 grandparents. And I think that's been just recently, it's been kind of a shift, and also just with COVID and everything that's going on, and we've lost a few family members as well. It's just seeing that importance of priorities in life, and for me, like, kind of focusing on family. Sometimes I'm up late, or I've got the computer out doing work when the kids are there. So just making sure you kind of take that time to spend with people, because life is short.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Life is really short, and what I have kind of experienced myself is that life can really sideswipe you, and things can change in a moment. And so it's so important to feel grateful and to genuinely be grateful for what we have, because we could either lose it or, things can change. And, if anyone's going through a bad time, like, that's also the same thing applies, which is that, it will also not be this way forever. And I just think that sort of like the fleetiness of life is really a good thing to appreciate. And, as we've gone through this pandemic, so many of us have lost loved ones. And it's just been a really, really grim and challenging time for everybody in one way or another. And certainly the pandemic has humbled us, as a majority. And if there's one good thing that does come out of this pandemic, is just our ability to really take stock of what we once had before the pandemic, where we could just all freely meet up and do what we want and travel and meet in groups and all these luxuries, eat in restaurants, that is just such a hassle to do these days. And look back with appreciation of what life was once like and what life is like now. And I think that kind of experience really puts life into context. So what have I learned from my guest from this week? I think what I've learned is that she's definitely a woman that is not afraid to work hard and not afraid to fight for what she wants. And it's not a fight to win over other people. It's a fight for herself. Working extra hard and proving herself amongst a group of people who are not like her is not so that she can feel better because other people have lost. It's more that she can feel better because she's put the most she can into her own life and she's tried her best. And I find that just so beautiful because it's not competitive. It's actually really loving and it's for the greater good. It sounds like it's been hard building a reputation for herself in engineering, and she doesn't play a victim for how hard it's been, but she does acknowledge that societal conditions haven't made it easy. And what's beautiful is that she's found a territory that really embraces her. And I don't know, there's something very elevated about her attitude towards that. It's kind of like, if you're around people and in places that just aren't supportive, then move on, don't get dragged down by that. And I really love that. She seems to be a woman that is open to clocking up new skills and developing herself and learning constantly. And I think that kind of attitude means that you will always continue to grow, because if you think you know it all, what more would there be to learn? And so, as well as being extremely humble, she also, as a result of what she's gone through over the last couple of years, has a real attitude of being grateful. And it's a reminder to all of us that adversity and challenges do make us stronger and do make us more appreciative of times when things were easier. And that's what I got from my guest this week. All such brilliant reminders. Thank you for listening. Please do subscribe to this podcast and maybe even rate and review it if you can. More ratings and more reviews means more interest from the algorithms, which will help to increase the popularity of this show. It's all about self-discovery and evolution on Innervation, so be kind and loving to yourselves, and I wish you all a great week.